Hey everyone, you ever feel like you're just drowning in information? Like every day is just more and more and more to
Oh,
process.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, today we're diving into your notes about smart communication and how to cut through all the noise and make sure that people really hear what you have to say.
Exactly.
We're talking about those everyday workplace situations like meetings, presentations, even those quick conversations that can totally make or break your day.
Yeah, we're going way beyond just small talk and,
Yeah.
just chit chat.
Right.
This is about really crafting messages that resonate with people,
hmm
that have the power to persuade and ultimately help you get things done.
And that's what we all want, right? To
Mm.
actually see our ideas come to life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we can all agree that communication is super important,
Yeah,
but we're all so busy these days, so why should we actually dedicate time to mastering this skill?
that is a great question. And I think it comes down to this effective communication. It's really the foundation of everything we do at work. When you can communicate clearly, you build trust with your colleagues, your
Oh,
clients. You avoid all of those misunderstandings and miscommunications that can totally derail a project.
oh yeah, those are the worst.
The worst. And then when you can present your ideas with confidence, people take notice.
It's not just about being heard, it's about being remembered.
Exactly. And studies have even shown that having strong communication skills can really boost your career prospects.
So it's good for your career as well.
Absolutely.
One thing that I thought was really interesting in your notes was this idea of ditching the jargon.
Yes.
Can you give us a real world example of how simplifying language can make a huge difference?
Okay, think about this. Have you ever been in a meeting where someone throws around phrases like leveraging synergistic methodologies?
Oh yeah, all the time.
What does that even mean?
I have no idea. I'm just sitting there trying to decipher the code instead of actually listening to what they're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of saying something like leveraging synergistic methodologies,
Yeah.
what if they just said we're using proven methods?
Straight to the point.
It's clear, it's concise. Everyone understands what they mean.
Okay, so once we've gotten rid of all that jargon, how do we actually structure our communication to make sure our message lands effectively?
That's a great question. It's kind of like building a house.
Yeah.
You need that solid framework, to make sure everything is stable and in its right place.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. And so when it comes to communication, there's a couple of different frameworks that you can use. One is the problem solution impact approach.
Okay, I've heard of that one. It sounds pretty straightforward, but how does it actually work in practice?
So basically, you start by defining the problem. Then you present your solution, highlighting all of its key benefits, and then you wrap up by explaining the positive impact that your solution will have.
So you're not just presenting the solution, you're explaining why it matters.
Exactly, and it's a very logical and persuasive approach that really resonates with most audiences.
Makes sense. It's about showing that you understand the problem and you have a well thought out solution ready to go. I've also found that sometimes, even though it might sound negative at first, using a more direct approach can actually be more effective, especially in situations where urgent action is needed. What are your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting point, and you're right. There are times when a more direct style is appropriate.
Okay.
For example, if there's an immediate safety concern, you wouldn't want to sugarcoat the message.
Yeah.
It's all about really reading the situation and then adjusting your approach accordingly.
So being adaptable and using your best judgment.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's not just about following a rigid framework, but also about being flexible.
right.
Okay, so we've talked about structure, but the words we choose are also important.
Absolutely.
And one thing that you mentioned in your notes that I wanted to dive into was the power of positive language.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. So think about it this way. Imagine someone saying, this might not work, versus here's how we can make this work.
It's a totally different vibe, right?
Yes, it's a subtle shift in the wording, but it can totally change the tone of the conversation.
Yeah, it's like one is shutting down the conversation before it even begins, and the other is inviting collaboration and brainstorming.
Exactly. And
Okay.
positive language, it encourages solutions-focused thinking, and it creates a more optimistic and productive environment.
It's like setting the stage for success.
Yeah, and studies have even shown that teams that communicate positively, they're more creative, they're more engaged, and they actually achieve better results.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ones we use are obviously important, but we also communicate through our body language.
Oh, absolutely. It's like that saying, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Right. Have you ever been in a meeting where someone's body language is just screaming bored or disengaged?
Oh, all the time.
It's so distracting.
It is, and it sends a message. that they don't respect you or value your time.
So what are some of those nonverbal cues that can make or break our communication? I know the source mentioned things like eye contact and open hand gestures, but what else should we be mindful of? Should we be taking notes? Should we be leaning in? Like, what's the secret sauce here?
Well, there's no one secret sauce. But one thing that can make a big difference is your posture.
Oh, okay.
Like if you're sitting or standing up straight,
Yeah,
it projects confidence and shows that you're engaged in the conversation.
makes sense. You're more likely to trust someone who looks like they believe in what they're saying.
Exactly. And here's another tip that I think is super interesting. Mirroring the body language of the person that you're speaking with can actually help build rapport.
Oh, interesting. But isn't that a bit like manipulative? Shouldn't we just be ourselves?
It's not about being fake or anything like that. It's more about subtly acknowledging and responding to the other person's nonverbal cues.
Okay.
We tend to trust people more when we feel like they're on the same wavelength as us.
So it's about finding that balance between being authentic and like making a connection.
Exactly. Now, another really important aspect of communicating effectively is knowing your audience.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You wouldn't talk to your boss the same way you would talk to your team. Right.
Definitely not. It's like giving a presentation.
Yeah.
You tailor your message and how you deliver it, depending on who you're talking to.
Exactly. You have to consider their priorities, their level of knowledge, even their preferred communication style.
Right.
Are they data-driven? Do they prefer visuals? Do they respond better to a formal or informal tone? All of that matters.
So it's about showing respect for your audience and meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely.
Okay, so far we've covered clarity, structure, positive language, body language, and audience awareness. It really is about so much more than just the words you say. It's about how you say it and who you're saying it to.
And when you connect all of this to the bigger picture, it really shows that effective communication isn't just about, getting your point across. It's about building relationships, influencing decisions, and achieving your goals.
It's about making things happen.
Exactly.
All right, so now that we've got the theory down, let's bring this to life with some real-world scenarios.
Okay, sounds good.
Imagine you're in a team meeting and someone challenges your idea. How do you respond in a way that doesn't make you sound super defensive?
Instead of immediately jumping in to defend your idea, try taking a breath and try to see things from their perspective.
Okay.
You could say something like, "That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from. Can you elaborate on your concerns?"
So it's about acknowledging their perspective and inviting them to share their thoughts.
Yeah, you don't want to just shut down the conversation.
Right. It's about turning a potential conflict into a more collaborative discussion.
Exactly.
Ah.
And who knows, you might even discover that their challenge leads to a better solution.
I love that. Okay, let's switch gears. Now imagine you're giving a project update to stakeholders. How do you avoid overwhelming them with data?
Yeah,
Because let's be honest, death by PowerPoint is a real thing.
it definitely is.
Yeah,
And no one wants to be subjected to a wall of numbers and bullet points.
I've been there.
So instead of just presenting that dry data, try using visuals like charts, graphs, or infographics to highlight those key trends.
Visuals are definitely helpful, but I've also found that storytelling can be really powerful, especially when you're trying to engage stakeholders who might not be familiar with all of the technical detail.
I totally agree. Storytelling is such a great way to bring your work to life and make it more relatable.
So instead of just listing off numbers, you can weave those numbers into a compelling narrative that really showcases the impact.
Right, instead of saying we increased website traffic by 15%, you could tell a story about how a customer was able to easily find the information they needed thanks to the website redesign.
Exactly.
Storytelling helps your audience connect with the information on an emotional level.
Okay, so storytelling is key, but what about situations where you need to use jargon or technical terms?
Mhm.
Like, let's say you're presenting to a group of engineers who are familiar with that language. How do you balance accuracy and clarity?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's like, how do you show that you're an expert without alienating people who might not be as technical?
Even when your audience is technically savvy, it's still important to be mindful of how you're using jargon. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So what's the best approach in those situations?
Well, one strategy is to define any acronyms or technical terms that might be unfamiliar to some members of your audience.
Right.
You can do this by just briefly explaining the term or providing a simple analogy.
So it's like adding little footnotes for those who might need a bit more clarification.
Exactly. And you can always offer to provide additional resources or explanations after the presentation if anyone wants to dive deeper.
This has been so insightful.
Glad to hear it.
We've covered so much from the basics of clear communication to more advanced techniques like body language audience awareness and tailoring your message for different situations. I feel like we're getting a communication upgrade in real time.
I love that. Yeah, it really is like leveling up your communication skills.
Which of these techniques will you focus on first?
Hmm. That's a good question. I guess for our listeners, what resonated with you the most during our deep dive today?
Yeah.
Was it being more mindful of your body language, or maybe it was structuring your messages with a problem solution impact framework?
Or maybe it was even just being more aware of how your words can impact others.
Yeah.
Like making a conscious effort to say, here's how we can make this work instead of this might not work.
Right.
It's crazy how such a small change can make a big difference.
I know, it really is. And that's what's so cool about all of this, is that even small changes can have a ripple effect on your communication and ultimately your relationships.
So for those listeners who are ready to take their communication to the next level, what's the best way to actually put all of these techniques into practice? It can feel a little overwhelming at first.
Yeah, it's kind of like learning any new skill.
Yeah.
Practice is key. Just start by being more aware of your communication habits.
Okay.
Notice how you phrase things.
Yeah.
How do you use your body language? How do you react in different situations?
So it's about becoming more mindful of those patterns and then consciously choosing to make those changes.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment a little bit.
Yeah.
Try out different techniques and see what works best for you in different situations.
Yeah.
You might find that certain approaches resonate better with different people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this has been such an incredible deep dive into the world of smart communication.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit to use both at work and in my personal life.
I love that.
It's like we've unlocked the secrets to clear, concise, and impactful communication.
We have. And remember, effective communication is a journey, not a destination.
That's a good way to put it.
Just keep learning, keep practicing, and keep refining your skills. You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of communication with us. Until next time, keep those communication channels open and flowing smoothly.